friends, welcome back to another episode of Random Gleanings. I am Chris, he is Jesse. Jesse, last week we had here in the office a investment in election years update that we shared with clients.
Yep.
It's a good event. If you didn't join us, please do come next time.
Yeah, keep an eye out in our monthly newsletters for those invites. It's something that we're trying to do more of, lunch and learn type things.
Yep.
And so this was a great one.
Love to have you. It was. So let's start out with just which political party has been better, Jesse, for investors over time.
I'm going to give us a quick pause just to let people think themselves on that, because I think that there are some strong opinions on this. But with long enough pause now, why don't you give us an answer?
So, I mean, if you look at this chart and the answer's at the bottom, U.S. stocks really have gone up. It doesn't matter.
That's a wrap. Thanks, folks. We'll see you next week.
See you. Right. No, I mean, the reality is over time, the irony usually is what actually works. So often what you think will work doesn't, and what you don't think will work does work. Yeah. And I can give some examples of that and will at the end, but you got to watch the end. So next chart, let's look at what typically happens during election years. So we've had a little bumpiness here in the last, few weeks. Mm-hmm. It's obviously April. It's the end of April. The day's April 30th. And you can see on the chart in the screen that in primary season, which we are in, even though it doesn't seem we're really having them anymore.
That's right.
It's usually a little bumpier, and it usually smooths out later in the year. In fact, if you look at the next chart, this is by quarter. You can see the first and second quarter in presidential election years tends to be a little lower when it's actually a little better in most years.
That's right. Yeah. So I think, early in the year of an election year, typically you see it underperform all other years. And then as there's some certainty as to who the candidates are, there's some more opportunities for folks to maybe feel more confident about things.
I think this third quarter is really interesting. I mean, presidential election years nearly triple that of the average. I mean, that's stunning, and that's since 1926.
I'll say in 2024 so far, we've had a better than average performing first half, or at least first quarter for sure. And so, maybe it plays out a little bit differently because of that primary season that you said didn't really exist this year. And so we'll see. But
and I should say, I mean, this is the S&P 500, it would appear. So, a well-diversified portfolio usually has a little more than the S&P 500 in it as well. So important to note that.
Yeah.
Okay, next chart. So, Jesse, what mistakes do investors usually make in election years?
They allow politics to influence their investment decisions, I think, very often. And this next chart really does show a good job of this, because if I like the Republican candidate and find myself as a Republican, maybe if I feel like he's going to win, maybe I'm all in.
I'm all in.
But if I think the other guy's going to win,
I'm raising cash.
I'm going to cash. And we see this.
So in this, what you've got is the teal circled in orange is cash, money market funds, and the blue is equity funds. So in year 3 and 4, what you've got is a pretty notable move into cash and money market.
Fund flows is just simply dollars going into these types of funds, money markets, versus the darker blue being stock investments or equity funds. And so you see there, as we get into year 3 and certainly in year 4, the year we're in now, folks are more prone to just keep their dollars in cash.
That's right. And so this is 1992 to 2023. The next chart, it's the same time period, really. You've got presidential election years, the amounts of money go up, okay? But then stock and bond funds, there's still money going into stock and bonds funds. It's just less than those non-presidential election years. And then finally, if you look at this next chart, which is cash buildup, in 2020, the election year, you can see the amount of cash that went into money market funds in 2020 was nearly over triple that of what went into stock and bond funds.
Right, yeah. So part of this may have been 2020 was a unique year. Maybe you don't recall.
It was, but it was an election year.
There was some money coming in, so maybe that plays some role. But yes, it was an election year, and it was a vitriolic election year.
Yes.
And which we are repeating right now.
Right. Seems to be.
Right. But what I found so interesting is, with nearly 3 times the amount of money that went into cash or money market funds than stock funds,
right.
Maybe folks were thinking,
it's going to be bad.
Regardless of who's going to win, it's going to be bad. Right. And Biden ended up winning, and Biden's first 100 days in office, at just 20 days after that study ended,
killed it.
He saw the best 100 days, second only to John F. Kennedy back in the 60s.
Since Truman, and beating out Obama.
Yeah, yeah. So,
which, by the way, came at the end of, the great financial crisis. So, goodness gracious. I mean, so in other words, Obama was coming off the bottom.
Right. Yeah, that's right. So, again, it's one of these things that you probably don't think is probable. There's a ton of cash right there.
Right.
And then they just missed it.
Right.
Just by not being involved.
That's right.
So,
all right. So next chart, let's take a look at the satisfaction with the direction of the country relative to the U.S. stock market returns over the next 12 months.
How satisfied are you?
Well, Jesse, that's a hard question to answer, but I will say that, if you look at what's going on, right now, 22% are satisfied with the direction of the country. If you're under 33% satisfied, the 12-month forward return for stocks going back to 2000 is 11.3%. If you're above satisfied, then ultimately returns aren't bad.
Yeah, that's right.
9.7. But the long-term return of the stock market is 10.2, somewhere in there. Mm-hmm. So a little better when the country isn't satisfied, right. A little worse when the country is more satisfied.
Which, again, as is so often exhibited in markets, there's kind of this upside down philosophy of, right. People are negative. That might be the right time to invest.
Right. That's right. So let's look at the next chart, which is satisfaction really by party. So the red line is Republican or lean Republican. The blue is Democrat or lean Democrat, right? Okay. So shocker. Hey, George W. is in office. Republicans are really satisfied.
And Democrats are very much not.
Democrats not. Hey, look, Obama, it's the inverse. And then look, all right, so this is laughable. So like 20% of Republicans are happy, and we get to 2017 and boom! I'm really happy. I'm really, really happy.
That's right.
And then Biden gets in, right, and the country's just going to hell.
It's interesting. I think the transition between Bush and Obama is obviously in the middle of the GFC, the Great Financial Crisis.
Right.
The transition between Trump and Biden is COVID. And so you see those things both get to lows, and that's just an interesting segment of history right there. So
listen, the takeaway on this is if you hear a newscaster report this, change the channel. Right. It's a nothing burger. There's nothing
in relation
to
this. Markets, and this is not a political commentary. I don't care. I don't know who you'll be voting for, and you don't know who I will be.
I hope somebody beside the two guys that are running. But regardless. Nice. Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
Okay, next chart. So let's talk about investing $1,000 in either party. Okay, so what you have on this chart is you invested $1,000 and what it would be since 1953, since Eisenhower was in office. Okay. Here's your $1,000 invested only when a Republican's in office. Okay. It's worth 20. And by the way, the amounts aren't going to matter in a second. Only invested when a Republican's in office. It's worth $27,400. Only invested when a Democrat's in office. It's worth $61,800. Well, hey, that's probably counterintuitive in and of itself.
For most people, probably.
Check out the next chart. If you just ignored all that crud
and stayed invested,
it's not worth $27,000 or $62,000. It's worth $1.7 million.
Yeah.
So
don't let friends invest based on politics.
Friends do not let friends invest based on politics. Mm-hmm. They just don't.
Right.
They just don't.
Yeah.
So final chart. This is from our friends at Capital Group, and this is their oldest fund, Investment Company of America, which has been around since 1982. They did a great interactive presentation. And shout out to Nathan Maines, our friend who came and helped us present for lunch. And basically what you found, now this is using their fund, not the S&P 500, but the best performer during that time period for 10 years, not for 8 years, but for 10 years.
From the election year, 10 years on.
That's right. So from the beginning of the calendar year, 1980, until the end of that time period, so I guess that'd be 1989, and then December 1989, and then W from the beginning of 2000 through the end of 2009. So W had a 2.7% average annual return in that fund. The S&P was actually negative during that time period,
slightly.
And Ronnie had 18%, which is pretty sporty. So.
Not bad. Well, ultimately, both saw a positive return in that fund, and just another indicator as to why one ought not let politics determine their portfolio.
Yeah, I mean, you've got two Republicans there, and those are the best and the worst since 1932 for a 10-year period.
W had the difficulty, I think, of coming off of, or really, coming into the teeth of the tech bubble burst, and then the end of his term was coinciding with the GFC. So
great financial crisis.
Yeah,
that's
difficult run there for him.
All right, what are you watching? What you got going?
Angie and I just finished watching Unlocked.
Okay,
this is a prison experiment. I'm not sure it's for everybody. Prisoners are not typically the most kind-mouthed people, but it was interesting in regards to unlocking the doors in a particular cell block of a Arkansas detention center, and just the dynamics of a community that is built in that sort of environment. It's pretty wild.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah. What about you?
We're still watching Tokyo Vice. Really good, really enjoyable. You won't see anyone from a character standpoint or from an actor standpoint. It's super cool, though, for sure.
My understanding is some of those guys belong in the penitentiary.
There are some, for sure.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah. So.
That's it this week, guys. Thank you so much for watching. We're grateful to you. Please do click the subscribe button. Click the bell if you want to be notified when we post. Please share with a friend. Friends do not let friends let politics influence their investments in an election year. Thank you as always. We'll see you soon.